nightmare.
Hello and welcome to Cinema Subculture, where we discuss everything strange, obscure and downright messed up in the world of movies. My name's Gary.
And I'm Simon. So Gary, what brings us here this lovely evening? What film are we going to discuss?
Released direct-to-video in 2015, Lucifer Valentine's Black Mass of the Nazi Sex Wizard, also known as Vomit Gore 4, serves as a prequel to the Vomit Gore trilogy, revisiting Angela Aberdeen as she journeys through a labyrinth of demonic hallucinations on her way to a satanic netherworld. So I was looking up, like all Lucifer Valentine's movies, quite a divisive reaction on the old internets. So the films get 4 out of 10 on IMDb and 2.1 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Oofed. It's a classic.
Love it or loathe it seems to be the trend there.
So what's your take on it?
So Vomit Gore 4, I really like this film. I think it is one of Lucifer Valentine's most successful movies. I think it improves on the disjointed nature of some of the films that are in the Vomit Gore trilogy. Thinking back to some of the criticisms I had of those films, I think they're sort of disjointed. They have a lot of characters and they sort of break down into these little sort of individual vignettes, which I think some of those vignettes worked better than others. So that was a bit of a problem. It made the films a wee bit patchy, I think. But what he's done here is, I think, created a more uniform, unified, direct, focused piece of work. So you have multiple characters, but basically he's been able to just mash it all together. It's less segmented than the previous films. And I think it's really good. Yeah, it's like full of strong, surreal, bizarre imagery. I mean, I think it works. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's a load of rubbish. But I don't know. I watched it twice for this. Could watch it all the way through. It's maybe a wee bit long. Could be trimmed a wee bit. The part of it maybe doesn't work so well. I think the Heather Cage performance as Angela Aberdeen, I think that's maybe the weakest part of the film. Just because I think the actress doesn't have a great camera presence on camera, especially compared to Amira LaVey from the Slaughtered Vomit Dolls. But yeah, I quite enjoy this one. I think it's one of his better movies.
Okay, so for me, I've said this before. I try to not know too much about films before I watch them. I generally don't really read up anything about them. So it was only after it really that I discovered that it was meant to be a prequel to the Vomit Gore trilogy, and even the fact that the character was meant to be Angela. I certainly got the repeated lines dialogue, that kind of themes and stuff like that. So I knew there was a connection. I already knew Amira LaVey wasn't back in the film in general. I do think she is missed. It's weird, for everything you said that you thought this was better than the previous trilogy, like the losing the segments and things like that. That was kind of going to be my reasoning for why I don't think this works as well. For me, this felt like a lot of repeated imagery, like over and over again. It felt like we were watching the same thing almost happen several times over, and I kept waiting for so the parts of I think looking back, my favorite of the other films was the second one, Regurgitated Sacrifice. I don't know, something about that just kind of hit the right level for me, and I really liked the segments and the I don't know why I said segments, really weird there, but the segments where and this, the different scenes and almost kind of the different characters were introduced. It stopped it for me becoming stale or boring, or just being extreme imagery after extreme imagery. It kind of broke that up and gave it some sort of purpose and made it feel like it was like some sort of trip through either an actual or a personal hell that we were seeing. For this, I mean, the beginning and the end I thought were pretty strong. But I think that was because I was really interested in where we were going with it, and then the ending I thought was pretty strong, like the kind of the dialogue and things like that. But for me, it just felt like we were seeing, and it was the same. To me, it was the same effect, even like the over and over again, and I was just I don't know, it just didn't do it for me at all. I'm trying to. I just feel like I felt this was a step backwards. It felt like a short film, like like something he would have made as a kind of like a short film outside of anything else. But it didn't feel like it lived up for me to the for me. Like I thought the other films were quite fun and quite playful and very over the top and very extreme, obviously. But as we're just describing the film, maybe it's fun and playful. But I didn't feel that this film had that, if you know what I mean. And then maybe that's just what I was looking for from it. But for me, it just, as I say, it just felt like it kept going, and it was it's different two girls with a different body in the bathtub, poking her eyes out now. Okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know. It just didn't. It felt, maybe it just wasn't what I was looking for from a fourth film in this series. And maybe it didn't have the elements that I enjoyed about the other ones.
I think what you were saying about it being repetitive, I think that's valid. But I think I kind of like the fact that it had basically the sort of mashed up nature of the footage. I like the kind of non-linearity of it. Just like a character was seemed to be seemingly dead, then they're alive in a next scene. I thought that worked quite well, because I think some of when it was shot a bit straighter, like some of the scenes from the previous films, they became it came down to sometimes just the strength of the performer. Like some are better than others. So
I agree with what you're saying. That I think, but I think that was where the other films, like if you got into a scene or a kind of vignette with characters that you weren't quite rubbing you the right way, you kind of knew that it was going to change tone or change scene, or you were going to find something different. It didn't feel like it got overstayed its welcome, right. If that makes sense. For me, that worked better in those films. Whereas here, I didn't feel the same connection that I felt we got to the Angela Aberdeen character through those first three films. I thought was really excellent. Like, the first one really was so raw and kind of like lo-fi and just in your face, and then the second one kind of, as it felt like it polished that a little bit, if you know what I mean. Not really, but not in the traditional sense of polish, but it certainly polished for me that experience. And I didn't feel a connection to anyone here. It kept feeling like, and I mean, I don't mean any offense, but like to the people that were in the film or the director, but it felt like people had sent him videos and he kind of edited them together from like fan submissions.
Well, it's definitely some of the content was exactly that.
Yeah, and that I think would have worked as connecting tissue between vignettes. If we'd had vignettes much like the other films, that those would have worked well as connecting tissue. But for this, it felt for me like I couldn't quite ground myself with anyone or something happening to any one person, and I felt what was the name of the main actress? Sorry, I forget her name.
Heather Cage.
I felt because it was filmed over quite a period of time, her appearance changed quite a bit throughout it, so it was kind of sometimes hard to. Is that the same girl? Right. So I don't know. I felt that kind of broke it up a little bit for me. It's weird because the little intro bit that's at the beginning of the copy that you gave me, where it's her talking about being a body modification artist and stuff like that. I don't know, that I feel that was a bit of a letdown after that. Like I feel that there wasn't much, like again coming off like the August Underground films, like where the effects in that are so high quality here, and I think it was always the case that they were going for a more kind of surrealist effect. Like they weren't looking for realism necessarily. It was more kind of just kind of the thought of it almost, you know. But when she was preempting it with that, I was kind of expecting something a bit, you know, a bit wilder with that type of stuff. I don't know if that would have, you know, helped it for me or not. But that, I guess, when I was like, oh, that's, to me, that's clearly a dummy, and it just kind of fell apart. Like,
right.
So,
you know, I thought that the dummy effect, I thought was done fairly well, considering the sort of budget and stuff like that. I found that quite. There was actually, I don't think I've ever seen that before. Like, where you had the dummy, but it's like, you know, a dummy where basically the entire face ripped open and someone like grabbing inside. I actually found that quite slightly, not stomach churning, but it was like, oof, that's, I don't think I've seen that before. That's quite slightly powerful and like,
but yeah, it didn't really work for me, man. Right. I didn't land. Like, for me, it was like, I don't know, and then you know what was came to my mind, and I like, came to mind when I was watching it near the end, where who's the guy that's in it that's the recurring character? I always forget his name.
Hank Skinny.
Yes. So he was one of my favourites from the original films, right? I always liked him. I thought he was fun. But here, like, I don't know. I'm gonna say, like, so one of the girls like pisses in the empty skull, and he drinks it. And all I could think, and maybe I'm just getting old, but all I could think was, how juvenile is that?
Right.
Like,
okay.
That was what I took away from it, and it was like, I'm like, but I didn't get the same kind of, like, because there was stuff that he did in the other films that was, again, juvenile, but it felt like he was doing a one-man show, like a presentation piece or something like that. You know what I mean? This felt like, I'm like, oh, just felt a bit kind of like juvenile and kind of, oh, he's drinking the piss, I guess. I mean, that's disgusting. I don't know. We meant to, I don't know. Okay, and it's out of a bloody skull. That's probably the disgusting bit, right? But like, but I'm like, it's a dummy, so I don't know. It didn't land for me at all. Like,
right, interesting. Yeah, I think obviously with what you're saying about there's no sort of grounding within a character in this one, but because obviously of like the intense editing, it doesn't really settle down into anything at any point. But I think that kind of worked for me better because it just creates the whole it makes the piece more abstract, I think, and surreal as a whole. But also, I think it's important to think about, you know, how do you decide what's the sort of criteria for deciding if this is good or bad as a film? You know, it's sort of outside traditional criteria of what we think of it. It's willfully obscure, it's willfully low budget, willfully surreal. So it sort of exists more in the arts, like we might call art film, the films of Andy Warhol, or you know, something you might see in a gallery rather than a theatre. But at the same time, is that just a way of letting the director off the hook? So that gives just leeway to do anything, and it can be labelled art. So I think the sort of the way to decide whether it's good or bad is a bit more fuzzy with the sort of space in which Valentine kind of works in. So I think you just have to kind of say, you know, what is the experience of you as a viewer? And for me, it worked. I thought it was a sort of well realised piece, and I kind of enjoyed it. Yeah,
I definitely agree. It's definitely, you know, a subjective thing, but it's interesting. All those things you're saying about the film, you know, about like the way it's filmed, the extreme nature of it. Like, everything you're saying there is still true of those original three films, and for, you know, and for me they worked better. You know, you can still say everything you're saying about this film, about those films, but for me, I just can't quite go over that. Like, what length is the film? The film's like, is it 75? What is it, 66 minutes?
Yeah.
It feels way shorter. Like, for me, like, maybe not when I was watching it, but like in my memory, I'm like, again, because all I can picture is like several scenes over and over again. That it's kind of like, and that, you know, it didn't feel like there was. And again, I say this loosely because I think those first three films, when you say the story of those first three films, I felt there was some sort of not narrative, but like some sort of, I knew I could pull something from what that character was going through, and what we were, and how what we were seeing related to that character. As I say, for here, it was kind of like, am I in that person's personal hell? Am I in the person that we're viewing, you know, POV's personal hell, or imagination or fantasy, whatever? I couldn't quite figure out who we were or what we were seeing. You know what I mean? Whereas I felt like that was quite clear in those original three films, that we were kind of going through this with Angela.
Right, yeah.
And we were kind of taking on the persona almost of her, of like Satan, or her personal demon, or whatever, you know, was the kind of embodiment that we were taking on. But yeah, as I say, I think it's hard to judge, because I don't think there's anything. I mean, I think going back to those other films, which I haven't watched since we watched them, it's all memory, right? The effects won't have changed very much. I don't think that's a fair criticism. This one, it stuck out to me because we kept seeing it, I guess. So I don't think there's anything anything in the filmmaking here that makes it a worse film technically for me from those other films. For me, it just didn't land what it was. I didn't get what it was trying to do.
Right.
Whereas I felt I got something from those other films, and I did enjoy them.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I don't disagree with it in a sense that it might be. I'd like to see him do something that was more traditionally narrative, which is, as I say it, it's like such a kind of mundane thing to say. Oh, I wish you'd just do a story. But I talked about that a wee bit on the Perfect Child of Satan review I did, which is kind of, it's only I think it's a 20-minute film, but it's the closest he's came to a narrative.
Right.
It has a start, middle and end, and it plays out that way.
When was that made again?
Somewhere around 2012, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
It was before this, okay.
Yeah, I think, and arguably that could be his best film, just because within that condensed format, you know, his style just works better. It doesn't become overbearing. It doesn't become dull or boring. And I really like the start of the Black Mass, because we do get a bit of space at the start. The sort of first scene, you have like a continuous camera shot. The camera's on the floor, and you see the character crawling from the bathroom, and I think that's actually, you know, quite a tense scene. And it's quite unusual.
That evoked what I was expecting, I guess, you know, from those other films. It definitely, I was like, okay, I know where we, you know, this is kind of familiar to me, and I like that kind of, that style and that kind of build up, and we're not quite sure who's talking to who, or you know, what's happening. So sorry.
Yeah, and obviously that, you know, lengthy shots is a way to build tension. As much as I love the sort of erratic editing style that he does, it would be quite nice to see him do more of that kind of shooting, because something else I talked about on the Perfect Child of Satan episode, I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I'll throw this off you, is I think what I kind of like about Valentine's filmmaking is the unpredictability, in a sense that I think as horror fans, I know definitely for me, I assume for you, like, we're always chasing that kind of adrenaline, fear, scares that we had when we first experienced the horror genre. But obviously, if you go to see a mainstream horror film, it might scare you, but you know these are the sort of boundaries of taste, which you kind of know what you're going to get. Whereas I think what I like about Valentine's filmmaking is the extreme low budget, the extreme content, the direct to video, the video aesthetic, for me, it comes as close as I think you can get to rekindling some of that unpredictability. Like, it's not really scary, but it's like, I don't really know what's going to come on the screen here. I think that's
yeah.
yeah. So it is by rejecting traditional filmmaking methods. I think it comes as close as you can get to sort of rekindling that feeling of terror that you got the first time you watched Halloween or something.
Yeah, I mean, I would push it to like, I mean, not just the horror genre in the film in general. You're kind of looking for something you've not seen before, right? Or for a film to swing a way that you weren't expecting to swing, but in some sort of, in traditional narrative, it's usually you're hoping for some sort of logical sense, right? But you'll take something, there's definitely filmmakers out there that push that into the kind of, like, where was that? Like Mulholland Drive, right? So like suddenly it's quite fairly traditional story. Suddenly it's just switched on a dime, right? And I think that's maybe what it is about this film. And like after a while, it was kind of predictable. Once we went back to the bathtub, what I was going to see, it was kind of like. And again, the pissing in the skull. I'm like, okay, I guess someone's going to drink this. Then it just felt like I knew where it was going a little bit, and especially as I say, when we kept coming back to that, and it was, I think that is kind of maybe what my issue with it is. Whereas I feel like, to say, in those other films, even though you might not have enjoyed every vignette you got, you kind of didn't know where it was going to go next. And as I say, even if you weren't into the next vignette, even the little connective tissue that he throws in, because a lot of this stuff in here, I think, would have worked as those kind of breakup pieces. And I do love the editing you're talking about. It's that kind of dropping frames and kind of the way he works the sound there as well to be almost rhythmic. I really enjoy that. But yeah, I was really hoping to enjoy this more.
Right.
Than I did.
But yeah, so going back to some of one of the things you said about it wasn't really clear what was going on story wise, who the characters were, is an interesting point, because I kind of agree. And then sort of going over like the bonus features and the commentary and stuff, it's kind of potentially valid criticism to say that he arguably should make it more explicit that like the main characters, Angela Aberdeen, it's a prequel, and all these different characters are sort of slotted wrong at all with like her hallucinations, but also they're kind of all versions of Angela. So I don't know if that really sunk in until I heard them say it.
Because I thought it was really cool when you hear her like saying the dialogue from the first film, like there was a few times where she repeated that dialogue, and I thought that was really cool. But that was, for me, then it felt, not knowing that it was meant to be a prequel, it felt more like some sort of sequel, and we were seeing like a different character with some sort of like otherworldly echo of Angela in her, that was being conjured up into her, and it was like almost like she was speaking, because in the way she was talking, it was almost as if she was possessed a little bit. It felt like that was what was being projected from her, was like a kind of echo of Angela. And I mean that's a shitty way to describe her playing that character, but that's kind of what it feels like. She's like an echo of LeVay, in those other films.
Yeah, and again, some of the sort of imagery in the film isn't really explained, because you've got the Nazi thing, which is in the title, and there's the use of the swastika imagery, but there's not really a lot of explanation for that. The same with there's a sort of thread about John Benet Ramsey, where we'll read the suicide or the ransom note, and then the stuff about palindromes and sort of palindromic numbers, and all that stuff's kind of in there, but not made explicit. But what Valentine says in the commentary is like he knows that, and then he knows it's really vague, and it's intentionally vague, is his take on it. He doesn't want to to over-explain it, and he just kind of throws it in there as a kind of in the mix as a kind of experiential thing. And what he was saying about the use of the swastika was it actually wasn't. It's not anything to do with anything to do with Nazism or that, but it was sort of a reference to, you know, how the swastika was originally like a Hindu symbol, sort of used by the Nazis, and how that is meant to reflect sort of how the human mind can sort of mutate and recreate and pervert an idea or an image. So that's the whole thing that's going on within Angela's mind. So it's meant to represent that. But yeah, you might come at it and say, well, that's just a mess. Like, that's not explained. But when the director comes out and says that's intentional, it's sort of kind of Lynchian in the same in a similar way as well. You know, if it makes sense to the director, does the director need to over-explain everything? But you could also say it's just a bit of a muddled mess. But to me, I mean, it doesn't really bother me, because I mean, Valentine's style it's about experiencing the imagery. I think it's the surreality of it, the extremity of it. It's not about the kind of ideas. I mean, it was the same with the Kurt Cobain sub-narrative. I think it was from Regurgitated Sacrifice, which only really becomes explicit when he says it in the bonus features, but ultimately it doesn't really matter, because I don't think it really adds or detracts from the film experience, in my opinion.
No, I'd agree, and I think that I'm absolutely, you know, I think I'm with you in saying that I think I can deal with you know, abstract and kind of, you know, subtle themes that were not told. It's you know, it's not something. It wasn't that I needed to know that that was Angela. This was a prequel. I don't think that hurt it for me. Knowing that, I don't think would have made it. It would have made it maybe a little bit more interesting at the beginning, like marginally so, just the way prequels tend to be when you know it's a prequel. But for me, the beginning really worked, and it just kind of lost me when I realised when I realised there was a lot of the same things happening over again, and it just I kept waiting for something, you know, for us to go somewhere and be with I don't know, a different setup. I don't know what, you know, or some sort of something, as I say, crazy kind of like where are we now kind of feeling that you get from some of these other films. But I think you're right. I think it works in those other films. I think it works here. The kind of subtext and the kind of, you know, the random elements in the film. I think that he achieves it because you know, you kind of left to think what you want to think with it. But ultimately, I think those parts aren't what hurt the film. I think it just just felt like a hell loop,
right?
and I didn't know if it was me or the characters that were in it.
Right.
You know,
I think that's what he was going for.
Nailed it. I mean, yeah, maybe that is what he's going for. Like, but for me, a lot less interesting than the other three films. Unfortunately, it's not the last Valentine film I'll watch, because I definitely, like, as I say, those other films will stick with me for, you know, for a long time. And I think as I say, it's just maybe this one didn't work for me. As I say, if you don't feel that way, and it's, as you say, it is pretty divisive, and I know those other films probably are as well, but I don't think it's not that I don't like it because of the content or the style of film that it is. It's just that I didn't think it worked as well as the other films.
I'm glad to know that you do think that his films are kind of interesting in general, because sometimes I'm watching this and I feel like I kind of like this, but I'm like delusional here, because, you know, I've done that in the past. You know, you watch a film, that's fucking good, and then like you rewatch it again, like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a funny title to throw in there. I couldn't get one. That's fair and gully. That's great.
You know, sometimes like you want to like a film. Like I did that with The Tall Man, the Pascal Lohe film.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah. He's follow up to Martyrs.
Yeah, I talked about that on an episode of Film Jive. I'd seen the film, I thought really good. Then rewatched it for that. It's like stinker. Sorry for picking this one.
No, I do. As I say, I've only seen them the couple of times we watched them for the podcast. But I mean, yeah, the fact that I can, you think of the August Underground films. I don't think we've even watched the third one of that yet. No. So I don't think in a year's time I'll be able to remember them apart.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't think I'll be able to distinguish between them. But for those films, I distinctly remember really enjoying the first one, but really feeling that the second one was the better one. And the third one felt like a kind of, it was the same kind of par as the second one. Maybe a little less, just kind of some repeated themes, but no, I do. I think he's a really interesting filmmaker, and Black Metal Veins was one I think I remember feeling quite uncomfortable with because it was a little bit more real. But I think I remember discussing it at the time that, we were chatting about what was actually, it was real, right? It was a real documentary, but what was real, and where had we got to the point where there was crossover in that film where it becomes more staged, but you're not meant to know where that is, and I guess that works, but it did make me feel a little bit more uncomfortable. But I still think he's a really interesting filmmaker, and as I say, that's kind of why I was a bit disappointed to not quite feel as warmly to this one as I did with the other ones. But nah, you're not crazy. Well, unless we're both crazy, that's possible. We'll see how many listens this gets on.
Nice.
How crazy we are.
Yeah, I'd recommend checking out Black Mass of the Nazi Sex Wizard. I think it's one of Valentine's most successful films. Unified, brutal, disturbing, extreme. Let us know
and divisive
what you think of it in the comments.
Yeah, and I'd just say I'd recommend watching the other films first, over this one personally.
I think if anyone can find A Perfect Child of Satan, I think that's a good way to start. Because it's only so short.
Sure.
Fair
enough.
If you can find that.
But definitely an interesting filmmaker that you should check out his stuff, I'd say.
Smashing. So, thanks for listening to Cinema Subculture. Please make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, like the video, and hit the notification bell.
Thanks for listening. I've been Simon.
I've been Gary.
Keep it extreme.
It was a nightmare.